public hearing shall come to order from the Committee on Rules, Federal Foreign, Micronesian Affairs, Human and Natural Resources, Election Reform, and Capital District. And before I open up this public hearing and announce those agenda items that have been publicly noticed pursuant to the Open Government Law, I'd like to first recognize and thank Senator Nerissa Underwood for being here, Senator Frank Uggan Jr., and then also thank the Minority Leader, Senator Tony Atta, for being here, as well as Senator Mary Torres, Senator Frank Blas, as well, Jr., as well as Senator Tommy Morrison. Thank you, colleagues, for being here to hear certain items on the agenda. And in accordance with the Open Government Law, notices of this hearing were sent to all main media outlets, all senators and stakeholders 5 days in advance on January 12, 2016. And a second notice was just sent on January 15, 2016. And I'd like to start by announcing again that we have two appointments to the Guam Environmental Protection Agency Board, the appointment of William Detry and Erning Zhou, as well as three bills on the agenda. Bill 200-33 is an act to add a new section 79601.3 to Title 21 Guam Code Annotated relative to the Pacific Radiation Survivors Monument. It's been introduced by Speaker Wampat and as well as several other members of the legislature. Bill 216-33, an act to establish the qualifications for the office of Governor and Lieutenant Governor, as well as residency requirements for all elected offices. And this bill has been introduced by Senator Frank Blas Jr. and Senator Tony Atta. And the third bill is an act to appropriate the revenues from the invasive species funds to fund the operation of the Biosecurity Division of the Department of Agriculture, and this bill is introduced by myself. I'll begin with the appointments to the Environmental Protection Agency, and Speaker Wampat has asked if I could reorder the agenda, and hopefully by the time she gets here, maybe we'll either be on that bill, but if she's not here yet, I certainly don't have a problem accommodating her. She is a sponsor of that bill, and her request is certainly reasonable. But let me call up both nominees, and I think there's only the chairman of the EPA board who wants to testify, so I'll call all three of you up at the same time. I'd like to welcome Mr. Detry, Mr. Zhou, and Chairman Perron to the table so we could begin hearing your respective appointments. Okay. And all three of you are no strangers to this confirmation process. I'll begin by inviting the chairman of the EPA board to present testimony, I imagine on behalf of both individuals or in favor of both individuals, and then we'll call up the nominees one by one to present their testimony to the committee.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman and Senators. I'm here in support of the confirmation of Mr. Detry and Mr. Zhou to another term as board members of the Guam EPA board. They've both been very active members of the board and have provided valuable insight from their experiences in their jobs and in their careers and in their personal experiences. So they've been very instrumental in assisting with the board deliberation and to come up with policies and to come up with ways of doing things a better way for the agency. So I really enjoy working with the two gentlemen and with the entire board of Guam EPA. It's a good board. It's a deliberative board that everybody has independent opinions and shares them and shows a disagreement when they have a different opinion of what's being presented. So it's a very good board in that it's very deliberative and it's not a rubber stamp for anything or anyone. So anyway, again, I stand in support of the two nominees and hope that you'll give them your support and confirm them.
Okay, thank you. Please stay back in case they have follow-up questions, if there are any. I'd like to recognize Mr. Detry for his reappointment to the EPA board. I want to just state for the record, in case anybody may wonder why the appointment was made on April 6th of 2015 of last year, and we're just getting to the appointment now. Unfortunately, every time we've scheduled a hearing, you ran into some illness, and so we had to reschedule. But the fact that we're hearing your nomination today is a signal that we didn't give up on you, and that you're here now, and we'd like to hear from you, basically your perspective on why you believe you should be reappointed or confirmed again to your reappointment to the EPA board. And I give you the opportunity at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Just going to keep it brief. Hafaday and good afternoon. I'm William Detry, Detry Corporation. I understand there are numerous short and long-term environmental challenges facing our island. My commitment will be in helping make tough decisions for the good of all of our people on Guam. And I humbly thank you for your consideration in appointing me into the Guam Environmental Protection Agency Board. And thank you very much.
Okay, please also just stay
Sure.
as a member of this panel, because I also have some follow-up questions. And Mr. Zhou, your appointment was received by this legislature on December 10th, 2015. And again, we have the opportunity at this time to hear from you with respect to your testimony regarding the governor's appointment for you to be on the EPA board, to continue to serve there. And you've been serving there since 2011, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Honorable Senator, Mr. Peso Committee Chair, and all our honorable senators. My name is Victor Zhou, also called Erning Zhou, two names for everybody. And as for the Board of Guam EPA member, since for 2011, for 5 years, I very happy, pleasure for working with the board member and also for the very professional staff for the Guam EPA. So today, I also like to continue to working with the board member, Guam EPA, and to continue to people to Guam, and also for the make our beautiful Guam, and no more reduce pollution, no more reduce for everything. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you to all three of you for your willingness to serve on that very difficult board. Certainly, it's a difficult board because your task is very grave, and that's to protect our environment at all costs. And I bring that up to, and since you are continuing to serve on this board, I just generally want to ask, to what extent does the board get involved in some of the decisions that the administrator has made, and has made these decisions public? I'm talking about his decision, the administrator's decision to allow for asbestos to be dumped at the landfill. I'm talking about the administrator's decision to move forward on certain purchases involving the Recycling Revolving Fund. And I'm talking about the administrator's decision to say that it's environmentally acceptable to divert the flooding that goes into the Tumon Bay. I ask these questions only to ask you, to what extent does the board get involved in these kinds of decisions? Are they vetted through the board? Are they just made by one individual? And and because they are made public, does the board share any concern with respect to some of the decisions that the administrator has been saying that it's okay to dump asbestos in the landfill, even causing the chief judge herself to be concerned, to say that it's okay to divert flooding into Tumon Bay, which has caused many people in our community to be concerned, particularly those environmentalists who have every right to express those concerns. Do you want to, at this time, give a response to my question as to how involved the board has been with these kinds of decisions? Let me go with the nominee. I know you're the chairman, but I want to start with the nominee, and then I'll give you an opportunity to. They've been there. They're already there, so they have an opportunity to express to this committee if the board has been involved in those, particularly those two instances I talked about. And what concerns me is that the comments were made by the administrator because it's important to allow for asbestos to be dumped in Lajan, even though he said that it's purely a safe method of disposing of asbestos, but he made it sound like we should accommodate that because it's going to be cheaper for businesses to be able to dispose of their solid waste debris. And he also alluded to the fact that it's okay to divert stormwater drainage into Tuman Bay because we have to accommodate the businesses and up and down San Vittorius Road. Is the board involved in these kinds of decisions?
Actually, Mr. Arnold, Chair. Actually, I also for the watching for this news too. As for the contractor, I'm also to construction. When it's heavy rain or for flooding in the Tuman Bay, what I'm thinking, I also talk for something about this. Maybe we try to see to upgrade some like a drainage area, so either for river not going to the sea and also for just go to underground, so we can see some of the area like more what do you call a pumping basin some area, so can keep it for the water for go down, not going to the sea, and for no pollution for also to the sea. That's how we also thinking that.
But was the board involved in the decision to say that it's?
We talking for the period for the board during the meeting, and
Mr. Chairman, go ahead and jump in here, Dave.
Okay. Yeah, regarding those decisions, those were made by the agency and by the administrator without input from the board. That wasn't brought to the board prior to it being made public, his position. The issue with the asbestos, I don't particularly have a problem with the asbestos. I'm a certified manager of landfill operations through the SWANA out of the U.S., and so I've got some little bit of background in landfilling, and I don't really have that much of a problem with asbestos. That's fairly common in the U.S. It's non-friable, it's double-bagged, it's identified where it goes in a landfill. So that particular issue, I don't have a problem with that going into Lejeon. I guess some of the neighbors would have maybe some questions and concerns just out of not really understanding the process and how it's handled safely. So, I think...
but even at that was not a board sanctioned decision?
No, it wasn't a board decision. I had personally talked to the administrator and gave him my opinion, but it was never brought to a board vote or brought up in discussion.
Do you think that those kinds of decisions should be board sanctioned?
I think it would be good if we discussed it ahead of time. That would be a good, input. So we'll discuss that with the administrator. That maybe that's something we need to have a little roundtable on in the board before it goes out.
But you mentioned something in your comments that I gravitated towards in my mind, and that's that the board is not a rubber stamper.
No.
And that you've taken on very strong positions in other matters, and so those two decisions that I talked about, I'm concerned that those were not even brought to the board.
Yeah, well, a lot of the stuff such as that can be highly technical, where board members may not have the in-depth knowledge that the agency itself has. It would still be good to kick it around so we would be a little more educated on it and can discuss it, but a lot of that stuff is fairly technical. On the asbestos side, I do have a little bit of a background with landfill.
But even more reason that it's such a technical matter in nature that it's presented to the board so that it could be deduced and digested so that the common person, the everyday person, can understand what those kinds of decisions are, how they came to those conclusions, and ultimately whether or not it would be safe for the environment.
Yeah, I'll bring that up.
It also lends itself to building the public trust when you have an individual saying that these things are environmentally sound, but yet he does not have the pleasure of also saying that these decisions were backed up by the Environmental Protection Agency Board by way of resolution. I think it will do a lot to calm the concerns that people have whenever these decisions are made public.
Sure. Yeah, I'll have a discussion with him on that, and also a public outreach probably would have been good early on too, to let the community that surrounds the landfill know about how that asbestos is handled and how it's done safely, and that they shouldn't have that big a concern if they get all the information they need to see really how it could potentially affect them. The other one on the water, I was not a supporter of that being
It's okay.
pumped into
I
Tumon.
wasn't asking so much your personal opinion
okay,
on
sure,
those two
gotcha.
matters, just so that I
Yeah,
could
okay.
generate a discussion as to whether or not these decisions are cleared by the board. And
Yeah.
apparently they're not. So it's to no fault of the board members or to no fault of your own. I'm just asking that there better be an improvement in the process of how these decisions are made and how the public is made aware of how these decisions came about. And
Right.
because it's hard to have someone representing the Environmental Protection Agency saying that these things are safe and sound, and it's an environmental practice that's done throughout the nation, but yet you have local people here who are all up in arms saying that it's a terrible decision. I can't believe anybody would ever think of that.
Mhm. Yeah, I'll have a discussion with them on it and just say, hey, let's talk about this first, because we would rather not see the stuff come out in the newspaper before we know about it, the agency's position. So I'll have a discussion
And
with
there's
him on
another
that.
thing I've been bringing up for years with the EPA board is the administration of the Recycling Revolving Fund. And I've written another letter to the public auditor just today, reminding her that she made a commitment to do an audit with respect to how the $12 million was transferred out of the Recycling Revolving Fund over the life of the fund.
Right.
And I think that if the board members step up and get involved and say that these monies should not have been or should continue to be transferred out of the Recycling Revolving Fund, because whenever we go to pay our vehicle registration, that $25 is supposed to be used to follow the spirit of that special fund,
Right.
and that's to promote recycling initiatives here.
Yeah, when that public auditor's report came out, we took it to the agency, the board did, and said that we wanted these rules and regulations put in place, and by the next board meeting, we wanted a timeline for the process for promulgating these rules. We wanted all that information and when we would have the rules and regs completed, when it would go to public hearing, and all this sort of thing. So we did get actively involved in that when that report came out. And I believe it's probably about 3 months away from being completed. I think it was a 6-month time frame that they put together to include public hearings and coming to the legislature. And
Have you seen any draft rules and regs? Because in that audit report, the public auditor also said that funds should not be expended from the Recycling Revolving Fund until rules and regs have been properly promulgated through
Right,
the AAA process.
yeah, I think the only thing that's being taken out of there now is the payroll for Sabrina, for the person that's handling recycling, and I think and that's in the law that person is
Yeah.
paid for. So I believe that's about the only thing that's being transferred out at this point in time. That's my understanding, so hopefully that's true. And we have a board meeting in about an hour and a half, so I'll find out if that is the case, but that's my understanding, is that.
Okay, because we also talked about, and I have draft legislation to figure out how we could leverage the Recycling Revolving Fund to support private sector recycling initiatives. These private companies do a lot to make significant investments here in the island to help clean up all of this recyclable materials. But yet, as we talked about, the market kind of, there's an ebb and flow.
Yeah.
It's at one point, scrap metal could stand on its own, and then as you told me this just now, that it's not profitable to
Right.
recycle scrap metal in the market. At one point, the same can be said with plastic bottles and.
Right, plastic is the worst because of the price of oil. Plastic is made out of oil, and with the price of oil dropping through the floor like it has, it's cheaper to just use virgin oil to make the plastic out of versus reprocessing old plastic. So right now we're paying about $260 a ton to get rid of plastic. So our company does the program that receives the residential recycling. So we have to dispose of the plastic, and in the past we would get maybe a penny a pound, and now we're paying out 13 cents a pound to get rid of it. And so we're losing money on that recycling contract with the government of Guam. So we're going to have to sit down and discuss it with GSWA to find out, hey, can we do something with this? We're losing our butts here because of the price of plastic dropping. So plastic and metal and scrap metal are the worst. Aluminum is probably 13 cents a pound, maybe down from 25 cents a pound a year ago. And scrap metal, they used to give you $100 a ton, maybe 200. Now you pay $100 a ton to get rid of it. So paper and cardboard have held up fairly well. Those are still can stand on their own at the moment, but that can go south anytime as well, especially with China seeing difficulties. That really affects the paper and cardboard market because that's where all of it goes.
So before I turn over the mic to any one of my colleagues here, I just want to ask again, would you recommit as a board that any time these major decisions have to be made, that it would be backed up by a board resolution? And the reason why I say that is because none of us in the legislature can say that the legislature supports this or the legislature supports that unless we have passed a resolution. And once we get a majority of the senators agreeing, then that's the will of the body. And I'm asking that for the next, going forward, that the EPA board, now more than ever, require that any time major decisions have to be made that would cause concern throughout the community, that those decisions be vetted through the board, and that those decisions and outcomes will be determined by a board resolution. And remember, through the open government law, you have to publish your agenda meeting so that if you're going to contemplate action on a certain matter, those notices would have to be made public, so the public will be aware every step of the way. And when you finally have your board meeting, the public will be there as well if they're tracking that particular issue, whether it's the asbestos disposal at the new landfill or the diverting the storm water into Tumon Bay and other matters that are still hot button items that they should be sanctioned through the board. And that's been my prayer and that's been my plea to you for quite some time now.
Okay, we'll bring it up at the board meeting today with the administrator, that we'd like those kind of things vetted through the board.
Remember, the administrator answers to the board.
Right.
The administrator is not even confirmed by the legislature, so you can set those parameters to which that administrator should operate, and the board has a lot of authority to do that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, we'll do that, Senator.
Thank you. Senators? Yeah, Senator Ergen.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon, gentlemen. Just a couple of questions. First of all, just a general comment as it applies to your desire to serve Mr. Zhou and Mr. Detry. I want to extend my personal appreciation for the two of you accepting the appointment by the Chief Executive in terms of being able to look out for the welfare of our environment in the community. Now, looking at that, we can anticipate by virtue of the record of decision and the impending military buildup that there's going to be a lot of activity over the course of the next 7 to 13 years. And I say 7 to 13 because that's the timeline that the military buildup is going to expand through. Now, looking at that, there's going to be a tremendous amount of unused property today that will be developed, both in the confines of the military establishments and also outside the base. Because obviously, with the buildup, we can anticipate an increased population or increased number of businesses out there. And I anticipate that over this timeline, beginning now, because the record decision has already been extended, but most particularly over the time frame that I shared with you a little earlier, that's really going to be the time where we're going to need all of you, all of the board members, to be as sharp as you can ever be in looking out for the mission of the Guam Environmental Protection Agency. Because ultimately it would extend and tell us where Guam will be in 20 years in terms of the preservation of our environment, the conservation of our climate, and whatnot. So, I mean, those are critical aspects, and I encourage the two of you as appointees that you continue to look out in the best interest of our island community. I understand the balance. There is a balance between supporting the establishment or the construction of businesses in a particular location and what is ultimately beneficial to the local community, the immediate surroundings, and our entire island. So there's always that balance, and that's going to be a challenge. My question, I guess, to the both of you, if I can just hear from the both of you in terms of the recycling and the reuse. I know Mr. Perron would be glad to respond to these questions, but just from your perspective, where do you find Guam today with all of our recycling and our reuse efforts? And where would you like Guam to be when the two of you have concluded your service to our community as board members? So please, if I can just get a response to those questions. Mr. Zhou, would you like to begin?
Honorable Senator, for the recycling, that one, I actually, I'm traveling, just like Mr. Perez said, mentioned that one. What I'm thinking, we try to reduce for the like plastic bag. So right now, like a pay less. Like every Wednesday, they already for the encourage for the people for the paper bag. So this is why I'm thinking, can they reduce for the that one too? So can also whenever from budget from our pollution to soil, also both them can. So that's like I traveling to Taiwan, Japan, and also some even from states New York too. In order for the separate very company and try to reduce not using plastic bag. So if we can further try to reduce that one, maybe it will help for a lot for it.
Very, very good point. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Detry?
Let's see. Let's try to answer your question. Can you hear me? Okay. I understand that a lot of our recyclables are sent to Asia, and a lot of times to make it profitable for any product to be recycled, there has to be a certain volume that has to be met. And these are all, everything that we're sending to East Asia, China and whatnot, they are large processes. If there was a way that we could perhaps take or introduce smaller processes that could be brought to Guam, and where we could actually do some of the recycling or reuse preparation for some of these products, I think it would be it'd be a better system rather than trying to pay thousands and tens of thousands of dollars for shipping everything. If we could find a way to reuse it and repurpose it here locally, and that would be something I think would be worthwhile looking into.
Well, thank you, gentlemen, for sharing your perspective. I think that let me just close with this. When we look at the quarterly event, the coastal cleanup, I think that that's truly reflective of a lot of the debris. Granted, some may originate from other locations, that a lot of debris that is left along our coastlines. And when I look at that and I look at the number of bags that we collect through your program that you help facilitate, it tells me that we still have a long way to go to work with the mindset of our community in terms of the recycling and the reuse. And once that mindset, like you said, if it becomes illegal to use plastic bags and our stores and our establishments out there are not allowed to use plastic bags after a certain date, then guess what? It automatically transitions. We no longer will have plastic bags being used either in stores or in different supermarkets. But it's that mindset that we need to continue to nurture along the way in terms of making sure that the entire community understands that, recycling, reuse to the best way, the maximum that we possibly can, and also being able to preserve the properties that we have in terms of the environmental impact. I mean, that's in line with the military but also with our community the next 5 to 10 years. We need to continue to nurture that, and I certainly anticipate and I look forward to some of your efforts on the board. Thank you very much, gentlemen, and you got my support. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Agan. Any other senator wishing to ask any questions or provide any comments? Senator Hara?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a comment. Just like to thank Mr. Detry and Mr. Zhou for continuing to serve on the board of the Guam Environmental Protection Agency. Probably just a question. what do you think more could be done to help curb the illegal dumping of trash in the jungles of the island? I mean, what are we currently? I know we're trying to put cameras in different areas and things like that, but what more do we need to do to further to deter the individuals from throwing their trash into the jungle?
Sure, I'll take it. Sure. I think more boots on the ground would be helpful. More people out there inspecting different areas that are prone to illegal dumping. I think that would be helpful, and more education on what this illegal dumping can do to our environment and to the water lens and to the pristine island that brings in so much in the way of tourism revenue and quality of life for our people. So I think a program of education along with more enforcement, boots on the ground, like I said, to be out there, going through the community and through the village and going to these areas that are prone to the illegal dumping and see if we can catch people and then prosecute them to the greatest extent we can.
Yeah, but I mean, they're throwing it into jungles for one reason or another, right? Either they can't afford the tipping fee, or they can't, they're just lazy to take it to the landfill themselves. But I mean, I know there was talk of legislation to increase the fines, the penalty for illegal dumping. Do you think that's something that should still considered something that should still be considered, or do you think other programs, like, for example, having a dumpster at maybe a community center where those that can't afford and throw their trash into the dumpster that can go directly to the landfill? Or
yeah, I know the mayors daily can bring in a load of trash into our transfer station at no charge. So I think if people do have a financial problem that they can't pay it, that they can work through their mayors to get some assistance in getting rid of the trash. So that's one way. And like I said, the mayors could have a dumpster at their facility that the people could dump into that weren't able to afford.
Yeah, because I know we're going to pay for it one way or the other, right?
Yeah.
Either we pay for it going into the landfill, or we're going to pay for it being in the jungle by means of polluting our waters, polluting our land. So
Yeah.
well, whatever ideas we can come up with, I'm willing to work with the board and work with the EPA and trying to come up with a solution for it. If not a solution, at least try to see what we can do to mitigate that situation. And
Sure.
because it's just becoming really unsightly that and I hope that more people take advantage of calling up their mayor's office and saying, what, I'm having problems this month, transporting my trash to the landfill. Would I be able to get some assistance?
Yeah,
Something
yeah,
like
I think
that.
that's possible. Yeah.
Yeah. But Mr. Zhou and Mr. Detry, you have my support, and thank you for stepping up again to serve on the board, and I look forward to voting on your confirmation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Torres.
Gentlemen, I want to first of all commend you for your willingness to serve. I know that you're all professionals and you all have business interests, and it is a service indeed to be on the board. Being that you are current members, Mr. Detry, you mentioned in your statement that you understand there are numerous short and long-term environmental challenges facing, and I just want you to expand on that very briefly. What is it that you see are the long and short-term challenges, and that you perhaps would like to address while you're a board member? And this is an open question to all three of you, if you'd like to contribute.
Well, just to reiterate what Mr. Senator Respicio had brought up earlier about the asbestos dumping, as well as the rainwater runoff down in Tumon. Yeah, they're both issues that are affecting us now and can and will affect us when the rainy season comes back, or when, say, if you got a fire, it happens down at La Zone. And they're a combination of both. there's something that they're both items that we need to address now, so our environment will be protected and somewhat safeguarded for the future. And just because we formulate a strategy for the runoff down in Tuman for the next 3 years, I mean, even if we're not going to send it out to the ocean, like, you know, and we have a diversionary plan or use another ponding basin, for example, to help it percolate and do sedimentation elsewhere. If that only works for 3 years, what are we looking at in 5 years? What are we looking at in 10 years, 20 years? And those are some of the concepts and challenges that I was referring to, if that helps you any.
One of the things that I see, despite anything that you might do in the board, I think what is really lacking is an awareness in the community, or the seriousness of it. And from our perspective, we can put so many policies in place, but until people actually own it, it means nothing. There's no enforcement, there's no compliance, there's no anything, right? And I think that's one of the hardest things. You had alluded, Mr. Chairman, to outreach. I think outreach at this point in time is probably so necessary. I just came from Saipan recently to attend the funeral of their governor. And as I was driving by with a friend, we remarked that it was relatively clean. We didn't see litter. I mean, it was recovering from a storm. So they perhaps had done a lot of cleanup efforts, but there was a different mindset there. And whether it's a community that's aware of who the culprits are when things run amok, or whether it's just each person having a sense of community responsibility, but their dump is right there in front, and so things are so evident and obvious about trash and trash containment and all that. But I would like, more. I don't doubt that you have a sense of what you need to do, and I don't doubt that you have the professionalism to execute it. But I think what the missing link right now is the other side of the community perhaps doesn't buy into that concept as seriously as we would want them to. And so my request to you is, please work with all of us to get our community to that level, because it just, there's nothing we can do to make people behave aside from persuading them to understand and appreciate, right? So I just want to leave you with that, but you certainly have my support as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Torres. Senator Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Peron, and Mr. Zhou, Mr. Detry. I spent partial of my life running away from you on the football field, but it's good to see that your efforts here that are being made to help our community and protect our environment. There's been concerns being raised by our southern community. I've been out in some of these villages, particularly in Inarahan, and there's at times where there's a stench. I'm not sure if it's just from downwind, but they believe that it's coming from the landfill, and I'm not sure if this is what the processes are with regards to controlling these types of stenches that are impacting the community. It may have a public health issue, but have any concerns been raised to the board regarding that matter? It's been raised here as well at the public hearing, but it's also being brought up in the communities down south that there's a elementary school right down the street too, and those folks have been there longer than I have, and they know their surroundings much better than I have, but they just feel that sometimes, or at times, there's a difference of what they're inhaling or smelling. Are you aware of whatever they're dumping there is properly processed, controlled, or covered, or so that way the folks down there feel that that's not coming from the landfill, or is there anything we can soften some of the concerns down there that that's not coming from the landfill?
Oh, if I may, Senator Morrison, the smell probably is coming from the landfill. One of the primary components of the odor there is the sewer sludge that goes down there. And one of the things is it's coming in pretty wet. So the wetter it is, the more odor you end up getting from it. So that's one thing I believe that the landfill has been working on, is getting GWA to bring in drier biomass or sewer sludge, whatever you want to call it. So that's probably the largest component to the odor that's seen down there. We have had a couple of people come into the board and express concern about the odors, and with the school just down the street. And the landfill operator has brought in a deodorizing system, a portable one that he strung a couple 100 feet of line with nozzles on it that spray deodorizer when the wind is in the direction of the school. So that's what they've done to try to address that concern. And if it's still a concern, maybe they have to put in a stronger deodorizer or more of a run of nozzles or whatever. But that's the main component, I think, is the sewer sludge, and that deodorizing system is supposed to be helping that out. And if you're still hearing complaints, let us know and we'll look into it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll do my best to also stay on top of it. But I want to thank you all for your service to our community. I look forward to working with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Morrison. Senator Underwood?
Thank you. I also want to thank you for being willing to serve as board members and having served in that capacity. We all know that the solid waste management has a recycling program, but it's only partially implemented. And so I guess our goal would be to implement that island-wide. What would be the role of EPA for us to be able to encourage an island-wide recycling program?
You guys anybody want to take it? Otherwise I will. Okay. The residential recycling program has been fairly effective in the residential side of the house. The next step we need to take is to go to the commercial side, because the commercial trash coming in is mixed with recyclables and with solid waste. So if we can encourage recycling on the commercial side, I think that would go a long way to increase our overall recycling rate and to keep the tonnage out of Lake John. So that would be my suggestion, to try to get the commercial folks to be recycling, the condominiums, apartment buildings, the businesses to have a same sort of thing, a single stream recycling system like the residents do. So that's something I think that could be looked at.
I'm sorry. Just as a follow-up, there were concerns that were raised during one of our hearings, which had to do with the CLTC and some of those properties that are up for commercial leasing. Mm-hmm. Now, EPA has had a role in ensuring that the environmental research had been conducted. Mm-hmm. Do you have any updates, or do you have any information relative to?
No, I haven't really heard of anything going on with those properties. But again, I can bring it up at the board meeting this afternoon and find out if there's been any progress on that, or what we're doing to make sure that all that property is clean before it's leased out on a new lease, and how we're going to pay for it and all that. I guess those are questions to ask also. We'll probably have to do an environmental assessment of all that stuff, right. And we just have to figure out how to cover the cost of it and those sorts of things. But yeah, it is important that that's done because there's been dumping on those properties, illegal dumping and otherwise.
My colleagues have raised the issue about the importance of raising awareness so that our environment and the love for our environment should be second nature. So when we see trash, we would automatically want to pick it up ourselves to make sure that our environment is clean and that we think twice before we get bottled water and so on. And so they've talked about education, and I think what we were alluding to was education as a whole community. Do you have programs right now that work with children? Because if we are to change the mindset sometimes of elders, right, it's a little bit more difficult. But if we have programs that we work with and you have policies relative to educating our younger generation, then perhaps the awareness and the values for our environment might be a little bit more successful.
Yeah.
And so relative to our appointees, what ideas would you have, or do you have policies existing right now regarding the education of our youth relative to the environment?
Senator Honorable, I think education is very important, even to start since for elementary school too. Like the kids to know about our beautiful Guam, so let them know for recycling is very important, and also for the, I think probably the EPA also. I'm thinking for the education program. I think probably coordinate with the education for the DOE. They work maybe together and let them to how to establish for the education program. But like Chairman says, so probably for the next come for the board meeting, we discuss about the education program. We will discuss about this one.
Do you think that at this point, because we've had, I know that in the curriculum we have certain things that, are certain topics that certainly address this, but in your experience having served on the board, do you think that progress has been made given the educational programs that we, if we have that incorporated already in the environment, has there been progress in your assessment of where we are at right now as a community relative to being more sensitive and more accountable for our environment, in your observation? I'm actually talking about the effectiveness of what we are currently doing and what your thoughts are. Are there more things that need to happen?
Well, I think right now what's being done in the schools is that iRecycle program that's being run by Peggy Denny, that a number of business partners have joined in to help educate the students on the importance of recycling and that can be a benefit to them on the financial side as well, because all that money goes back to the schools. So that was kind of the first start of really bringing the school children into it. A number of individual schools have their own programs. They have a champion at the school that oversees and pushes these kind of programs. Like at GW, you got Marine Mania, and you've got some really good people out there. But I think we probably need to do more of a coordinated effort with the schools where we can get a curriculum to all the schools that can join in those kind of efforts and have the resources necessary to get the job done and to educate the kids. And like you say, that's where it's a generational change. And I think the kids can, teach the adults as well as transition to a more green life going forward. So, I think that's something we can also use the recycling revolving fund for, is to develop curriculum and provide materials and information to the schools. So if that's something, we'll have to look to see if that's allowed under the revolving recycling fund. And if it's not, we can come to you folks for some type of approval to do that sort of thing. But I think it would be beneficial if we took the next step with maybe using that fund to really do some education out there with the kids. So
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Underwood. I'd like to recognize and thank Senator Speaker Wampat for being here. Speaker, do you have any comments or? No, he already spoke. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this opportunity. As I was reviewing, of course, your packet, Mr. Zhou, you've indicated here that you've been, of course, serving or have served since actually in 2011 to the present. So then this is a term then to serve for another 3 years. So since the time that you've been on the board, and I noticed also that you've taken the time to actually go to a compliance conference with EPA, which is great. What are some critical maybe decisions that you'll be able to share with the legislature that the board has made? I mean, we're not privy, of course, to a lot of the board meetings that goes on, but is there anything critical in terms of what has happened, and decisions that the board have made? Can you share some of those?
I think for some honorable senator are talking about sort of like a lot of for the critical something. I do construction. I'm a contractor. Actually, when we do go to for the just like senator other side, when we go to for the jungle yard, actually it's a lot for the dumpling thing. I remember for last confirmation for the meeting, I want to for the submit an idea for the encourage people not to illegal dumping something. For example, when it go to jungle yard, a lot of city can see appliances like washers, like refrigerators, tires, so many things. I think mostly the people wide for illegal dumping there for free for nobody to see. If they went to for the solid waste, people have to pay. So what am I thinking for that one? So we can encourage people for free. We make for some certain area for free, collect from them, or make very even little bit money, encourage to bring for the certain area, not to illegal dumping there. So that one also can try to reduce for the illegal dumping and also not pollution of our soil.
That is interesting, and I'm glad you brought that up. But because you do have some, of course, background as well in construction and a company, of course, in China, and there's been a lot of innovative stuff being done in some of these other countries. Are there anything that that has occurred there that may be something that Guam can use? I mean, like for example, we always say that one man's trash can be another person's treasure. And sometimes, we can take some of the construction materials, like let's say tiles, and, what could be done with those that, so they don't become, part of our landfill, and that instead we turn around and put it to good use, maybe in the community as an aggregate for something, whether it's for roads or sidewalks or what have you. Have you ever brought that up to the board at all? That EPA should, consider even maybe, and even or to talk to Senator Respicio about that, who has oversight of EPA, to maybe consider legislation so that we don't fill our landfill before it's time by actually taking some of these construction materials, like you say, and rather than just dumping it illegally, but turning it around to be recycled, reused, in our community.
Okay, like just for example, like for example, for construction when the final for finish complete for the job site, mostly for the lot for the formed 2x4s. Actually, some of them still can reuse, but the reuse not for construction. Maybe you can encourage, do something for the environment. For example, some piece of the wood. If just buried or for some, that will be not good for our soil. But in our Guam, we have a lot we are local for artists. They're using it for decoration, for the buy from wood, plywood, lumber, even some level. So what I'm thinking, even the piece for the ceramic tile, even with decoration in some area, it's just like an artist product. So the one thinking, but we have to encourage for them, not just let for to transfer for the transfer of that one. So I'm thinking, of course, for the construction, maybe cannot reuse that one. But for the other field, maybe should encourage for the use other field. So that's try to reduce. You can reuse and reduce for the solid trash field.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Mr. Detry, in your statement, you said that you understand that there are numerous short and long-term environmental challenges facing our island. So can you share maybe what are some of those that the short and long-term? Did somebody ask that question already? I'm so sorry. Okay, if you answered,
Okay,
then I'll read the committee report.
Think alike.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll read it from the committee report. I don't want to take up too much time. Now, of course, the question that we always ask when we consider that individuals who do serve in the board and that the possibility of any conflict of interest, that I'd like to ask you if, in some of in the mission statement and their rules and regulations, and as a regulatory agency, one of the things, of course, that EPA actually would do is actually go in and do some testing, of recreational waters and other waters, of course, in the island to determine whether there's, bacteria there or, chemicals there, what have you. And I know that your business, I just read it here in your resume, is that you're into wastewater hauling. And so can you explain if there is or there isn't, and if there is a time when that should happen, what would you do?
I'm sorry, your question, ma'am?
Because you're the owner of Detry Corporation or Detry Plumbing Service, and if there is a conflict of interest in some of the regulatory, requirements of EPA, or to ensure that anyone with dealing with any type of contamination to our recreational waters, drinking waters, or what have you, whether there could be a conflict or not. And if there is, then what would you do?
Well, first off, to avoid conflict, we comply with whatever regulations that DOT sets up for our vehicles. We have our drivers certified to be as wastewater haulers and certified to be safe operators of the vehicles. Our task, 9 times out of 10, is to take waste septage or wastewater or from point A to point B, and then point B would 9 times out of 10 be a certified wastewater treatment plant. And as long as we follow and not veer off and take wastewater to an alternate location, which is a big no-no. If anyone was in my company was caught or reported or photographed doing something of that nature, there would be, I don't want to say immediate termination, but we would investigate it to the, to every, to the fullest extent of the law. As far as conflict of interest, it's a good question, but we're just doing following the rules to the best of our ability. If something does come up rules, regulation-wise, that would point that we're doing it incorrectly, we would make immediate corrections. As for testing, like you were saying, testing beaches or rivers or whatnot for unsatisfactory levels of contaminants or whatever, it could be E. coli for all I know. We're open to it, but as long as we follow the rules, I don't think there would be a conflict of interest. That's just my opinion.
Thank you for making that statement, of course, publicly, because it's important to, for the people to know as well, is that, you would hold, of course, your workers to the highest standard. I mean, you're right. You're not going to go to that extreme to say, you're right, that you're going to get rid of the individual, but that you want to make sure that the laws are followed, because many times, that has happened. I'm not saying it has happened here. I hope it doesn't happen here. We heard about the situation, of course, of Flint, County, of course, where to save money, sometimes, by cutting costs, not getting it to the proper destination, proper disposal. So you do a shortcut, take it elsewhere to dump it. We've heard a lot of those stories in the mainland, and I just really hope that, it would never come to that point here on our island. I mean, there's so much already that has contaminated our waters, our grounds and all that, our air. And I surely don't want it to be where we ourselves, the people of this government who runs this and runs the island, that we're going to end up doing it ourselves to our own people. So I thank you very much for that comment. The last thing that I don't know if anyone had asked is, I live in Inarahan, of course. The landfill is across where I live. And, I've heard from many of my neighbors that, one, of course, the stench of the vehicles, going into the landfill, that I understand. Because sometimes, I follow those trucks that are transferring. But the one that concerns me that there's no way that, I would even attempt to start to investigate myself, but I think it's something that maybe you would know, that I've been told that there are pharmaceutical wastes that have been taken to the landfill and dumped there and taken there after working hours. And I mean, of course, this is the first time I've brought it up. I have been told about this many times. There's no way to verify it. And I'm just wondering is there anything, would you know, whether it's, to the point of it being gated, where they're monitoring who comes in, when they come in at certain hours, and really know what's in there. From what I was told, some of it, of course, are kind of buried below some of the other typical waste that you see that normally is allowed in there, and covered what's not allowed. And I'm just wondering whether is there any kind of monitoring to really make sure that, I'm not saying we're going to go and, rake it to kind of see what is there, but we just want to make sure that we're not putting, that it's strictly household type of waste and not any other type, like pharmaceutical waste, hazardous waste for that matter. So, I mean, I don't expect an answer for you, but I want you to be aware of the type of information, that we are getting. And then the last, of course, would be, and I don't know again if you discuss it, but there's been this whole discussion with your director about trying to get the landfill to accept, this asbestos-laden tiles or whatever that was from the DOA building, to get it to qualify that landfill to take, these hazardous wastes. And I hope you really, carefully look at that. I think that would be one of the worst thing to do, is to certify that landfill, which is for household waste, to now take hazardous waste. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and thank you again for all your questions, all of which are certainly in line with the discussion that we had with regard to the nominees. Just so you know, and it's really worth repeating, when the speaker asks Mr. Detry what are the short and long-term environmental challenges that you believe pose to our community. That question was asked by Senator Torres, As Madam Speaker, his response was the two issues involving the stormwater diversion into Tuman, as well as the dumping of asbestos in the landfill.
Okay.
So he gave
Thank you.
excellent responses to those questions. So if there's nothing further from this committee, I also want to continue to express my support for EPA to provide the much resources as possible, but more importantly to give you the autonomy that's necessary in order to provide that kind of checks and balances. So I don't micromanage, I don't have all these oversight hearings over EPA, only because I believe that EPA board should be the one that regulates the decisions of the department. But I do want to say that I think I'm coming to terms with the possibility of having to do an oversight regarding the recycling revolving fund. We just played too fast and too loose with how that fund has been administered over the years. More importantly, how $12 million were transferred out of that fund, and how the public auditors committed to following where the money went and how that money was used, other than the fact that it should have been used for recycling initiatives. So, and I've been saying that for a while now, that we will have an oversight hearing regarding that. But thank you again for your commitment and your recommitting to the idea that any major decisions that are going to be made by EPA must be vetted through the board and must be adopted by board resolution. That's the only way you're going to get the community buy-in that other senators have talked about this afternoon with respect to creating this increased awareness of how important it is with respect to the protection of our environment. So if there's no other questions, if there's no other comments you'd like to make, thank you for spending your afternoon with us, and we'll move very quickly to report your nomination out for the body's disposition. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is bill number 200-33. It's a bill that's introduced by Speaker Wampat. Okay, thank you. Senator Dennis Rodriguez, Senator Mary Torres, Senator Frank Uggan Jr. Thank you. Senator Blas, Senator McCready, Senator Underwood, Senator Spaldon. Thank you very much. And Senator Morrison, and it's relative to the placement of a monument for the Pacific radiation survivors. So I'd like to invite who signed up to testify other than Robert. Mr. Celestial, and who else do I have to hear? Mr. Farnham and Rosita? Miss, you're just here in support. If you would like to provide testimony, we'd also like to invite you up. Okay. I would like to invite the speaker at this time to provide a sponsor statement regarding the bill. Madam Speaker.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to share, a lot of people may not know this, but Guam has also made ultimate sacrifices, of course, during and following the events of World War II, and during the United States testing of 62 nuclear bombs on Bikini Atoll in the Marshall Islands between 1946 to 1962. Guam was exposed to nuclear radiation fallout, which traveled downwind to our island. It is no doubt that our people of Guam have suffered from nuclear radiation exposure related cancers and illnesses, and to this day, our people continue to suffer the effects of the United States nuclear testing within the Marshall Islands. I've been working, of course, with several individuals in our community, survivors actually, in the case of including Guam in some of the ERICA legislation, which would provide some compensation for individuals who have been exposed to other forms of hazardous waste. But Guam is the only one in which a study was actually done to verify, in fact, that we were definitely exposed. Anyone living in Guam between 1946 to 1962, were exposed, have been exposed to that radiation fallout. And this bill, I mean, sometimes to others may seem so innocuous because we're doing this, but that's the one thing that I honestly have to say that I'm very proud of is our people is, how we never forget, those, our loved ones who, have suffered, have passed on, are suffering, and eventually, of course, would, pass on. And we're unique, in the sense that, we never forget and we want to remember. And this memorial, of course, is nothing that could, speak to what, everyone is, those who've suffered and suffered are going through. Now, I'd just like to also state that although a specific site was mentioned in the bill, I've actually had some conversations with other individuals within the governor's office that is actually looking at all the monuments that we have scattered throughout the island to try to find maybe like a much more appropriate area to be a little bit more, solemn and to recognize and to, be able to just have that area that's just almost sacred, so to speak. And, and I'm willing to work, with them as well. But the most important thing is, to be able then to do this and recognize all those who have, been affected. So in the areas to erect a Guam Nuclear Downwinders Memorial Monument. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Gentlemen, we'll let the lady go first. Ms. Birdwell.
My name is Rosita Taitano Birdwell. I am a victim of cancer. My brother C.L. Taitano died at a very young age. He had pancreatic cancer. He had suffered a lot. I spent a whole month with him at the military hospital. I saw other victims over there, and I watched him, and my brother struggled. I know that he worked very hard for the island of Guam. He was involved with the education part of the island of Guam. He suffered a lot during the war, too, including the camp in Maningan. He is like our father and our mother. My mother died during the war. My father worked very hard. We were very fortunate that we had uptons of uncles and aunts that became our parents. But I am very proud of those that are backing this particular bill. And yes, it would be nice to have something, because I have followed this up. I know that Guam has a higher rate of cancer than the United States. And I have contacted cancer in 1983, and then in 2008. I have very fortunate, and I am blessed that they were all caught early enough that I don't have to have chemo, but I did get radiation. And believe me, it is not fun to go through cancer. I have to think of all the people. I have aunts and uncles, grandparents that died of cancer. And we should recognize how big this problem is to the island of Guam and to the people. You have to excuse me because I am also diabetic, so I am a little bit, I'm not very used to speaking in public, but I'll be more than glad to speak in front of anybody and back up this resolution. And it would be nice to recognize for all those. I have friends, Mrs. Annie Rosenberger, who's also a relative that died of cancer. And there are still those that are suffering with cancer. I belong to a prayer group from my church. And there are about 12 ladies that we get together. We visit St. Dominic's, visit homeless, we visit people at home. And when we get together and we talk about our problems, which we are all older people, so of course we'll talk about our cancer, but we don't cry about it. We continue, we laugh at it, and we laugh at our disease. These are strong people. And the people of Guam are very, very strong. I have to say this. I am 79 years old. I live by myself. I lived in the States for 45 years and worked. And I came back to Guam. My husband and I both retired. We decided that is the biggest gift that my husband gave me, to return to the island of Guam. We took our savings. We have a piece of property that we bought. We built our own home. I am living by myself in Jonia, in the home that my husband and I built. We went and got everything that is approved by FEMA and that, and we tried to follow that through. Thank God, and I've been blessed because the house is still standing. Even with Pangsamwa, we did lose a couple of part of the roofing, but we built back and it's still standing. I think that God has been good to the island of Guam, and I think that the people of Guam, you know, I was listening to your first hearing, and I listened especially to the chairman, and Mr. Respicio, you brought up a very important question. Why don't they present the problems to the board? This is very important. We need the people to be aware of what any department in the government is doing. And you cannot do anything. You cannot achieve whatever your promises are to the people of Guam. You cannot, if we have people that think that some of the people of Guam are so ignorant that they cannot understand whatever, and the board has to be part of it, and the speaker would have to be responsible to make sure that these things are being laid out. And you guys are responsible to pass this on to the public. The public also have to be aware. We voted for you, and we trust you, and we want you to do your job. And I have to commend what you guys are doing. And I know it's very hard, and I know it's very expensive. But you know, the prices are going up, and the income is not so much. I live on my Social Security. I'm not destitute, believe me. I have a roof over my head, I have clothing, and and that's the most important thing since I was little. As long as you have shelter, you have clothing, and you have food, you will survive. And there's a lot that you can do. When we moved back here and built our farm, I made myself promise that I am going to grow everything on my land that is growing on the island of Guam, because they are all being ruined. There's hardly anything. But it is up to us to keep that up. And I want to thank you for this. I'm going into so many, but I wish that I was just about 20 years younger. And I will give everybody a run for their money. Believe me. I want to thank all of you for the job that you're doing. And thank you for those that are backing this resolution. And yes, it would be nice to have that monument built for those people, for PARS. Thank you very much.
We want to thank you also for your eloquent testimony and for spending the afternoon with us. We can listen to you all day. So if you need more time, please.
You know, I've always said I've been blessed. And I keep saying, there is a reason why God wants me. The brain is still working, and
Amen.
The mouth is still working too.
Amen. Thank you so much for your eloquent testimony again and for being here. Robert?
My name is Robert Celestian. I'm the current president of Pacific Association of Radiation Survivors. I want to thank each and every one of you, Madam Speaker, Mr. Chairman, and all the senators. Like Mrs. Birdwell said, we commend you. We thank you for supporting the monument. On my way here on the drive, I said, it's a monument to remember those who have passed away. And I was thinking, I said, there's a lot of people who were affected by this hidden agenda back then in the 40s and 50s and 60s that have affected a lot of our people. And I smile because I look at the area that is awarded to us, which is great, but in the future we're going to need an extension. And I say that with all honesty because there's a lot of people who were affected, but mainly that this bill is a really good beginning, because we started back in 2000 when I went to Washington, D.C. to prove this issue, because there was a lot of doubt and uncertainty. And it was the National Academies of Science that actually said that the residents of Guam are eligible to receive compensation for being affected from all the nuclear fallout here on Guam. And by that statement, it not only proved, but it helped a lot of people and comforted them that they have an understanding of what is happening to them today. And with this monument, we could honor the ones that have passed who had no clue that they were affected by nuclear fallout. And by your support, it just shows us that you do care for our people here on Guam, because this is a very serious issue. And I thank you for asking the EPA to be more aware of these issues, because these were classified information kept secret from the people of Guam, and we don't want the same thing happening, especially in our dumps or anything here that may affect our people here in Guam. So I'm glad and happy to know that you're forthright and really want to help the people of Guam, not only on the radiation issue, and most of all, I just want to thank you. And this monument is going to mean a lot of good things, even when we're gone. Thank you so much.
Thank you also, Mr. Farnham.
Good afternoon. I'm John Farnham, Madam Chair, Speaker, and the Senators. Thank you for having us here. I speak on behalf of people I can't speak anymore. A lot of people, of course, like our president here beside me, have indicated that our lives have changed a lot. Living out on this island, beautiful paradise, Guam here. Of course, we even have other people living here, but back then, my dad came out here in 1947. It was built up of all the military installation, met up my mom down from Benarahan. And of course, they're not here anymore. They passed on with cancer. My mom in 1992 and my dad in 2003. And believe it or not, I'm one of the cancer survivors out of September 2010. I just lost my oldest brother's wife, my sister-in-law, in October last year, and the same as my youngest brother at the age of 49 with cancer. So I'm in great support for this monument as we speak of, and it means a lot for all of us. At least something to dedicate that their losses are not forgotten. There's plenty to be said, and I think each and every one of us are well aware of these calamities and the things that we go through in life. It's not easy. I got 3 sons and a daughter. I got 19 grandkids, and I got 11 great-grandkids. So I'm blessed. But I say this, we need to all work together. Find a solution, something very strong for all of us that lives on this island. And I want to thank you for everything, what you're hearing from us, and hopefully it channels itself something positive for all of us. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Farnham, also for your eloquent testimony, all three of you. I'd like to give an opportunity to anyone here who would like to ask any questions or comments or follow-up. Okay, if not, I want to take the opportunity to recognize Speaker Wampat as the sponsor of this bill. but also to say I appreciate her comments in that the initial feedback regarding the bill is that maybe in front of the Skinner's Plaza may not be the most appropriate place to put the monument, and this was a discussion that came up with the Hagåtña Redevelopment and Restoration Authority. And if they were to follow through on all the current mandates of all the monuments that's required to be at that spot, it'll look like headstones. And I just don't think, as the speaker pointed out, that's not our objective. Our objective is to provide some kind of monument that celebrates the life and love and legacy of all of these individuals. And if you were to put all these monuments in such a small, compact and compressed space, we're not going to achieve that kind of glory that we're looking for. And so there's two options. One option is to leave it to, there's actually a monument commission, local government, a monument commission that is tasked to look at all the placements of monuments throughout the Hagåtña. And this bill was referred to me because of my jurisdiction over the Capital District, and that's why we're looking to work with the speaker to see either we let the Monument Commission determine the best placement, or the other thing we could do is wait till you guys come up with a suitable site that you would prefer, communicate that to the speaker, and we could probably pre-clear that site with the Monument Commission, and then we spell it out in this legislation so that we don't leave it to them to do or not to do exactly what the speaker's intending to do by way of Bill 200. So I'll be guided by the speaker as a sponsor of this bill, and you also let me know what you prefer, just to defer to the Monument Commission or identify a site. We work with the administration to pre-approve that site, and we work with the speaker as a sponsor of the bill to name that site in this bill. And so we can guarantee that that's where you say you want the site is exactly where that site will be. Ms. Bergman?
I just want a simple question.
Yes, ma'am.
Is this monument going to be stationary, and who is funding this?
What we're looking at, yes, of course, it would have to be a monument that will be a structure that will be permanent, not something that's temporary. And then, of course, one of the things we're going to look at would be, we had that conversation also, and we had several options. So that we would do once we finalize, exactly where and what type it would be, because that would determine the cost. Because Mr. Celestio had also indicated that, at least initially, when you think about a monument, because we talk about 20 feet in length, 20 feet you see in the width of that, but there was some discussions that really could almost follow a path, maybe whether it's in Agana or somewhere. It's like when you're like what we have with the red bricks to kind of show specific spots that is a tour site, something maybe to stop and read some history of it, that could, we were thinking of an idea of some of that actually maybe reflecting that same, concept. So, but the idea is that we wanted the introduction, of course, and I wanted the introduction of the bill to really get the discussion going, because like the Senator alluded to, there is this commission, a monument commission, that's looking at basically all the different places where they have monuments here that sometimes don't really belong there. It's kind of awkward, and it does not meet the, how should I say this, just the area decor that, something maybe ultra modern versus something that is, antiguo, it's like a contrast. So we want this to fit right, and I want it to be, of course, a monument and a site where it will get that, honor and respect, you see, that it's so rightfully deserved. So once we get all that, then we would have the details later on in terms of cost based on the size and place.
Mr. Celestio, were you going to say something when I talked about? Okay, good. Okay. There's no other questions or comment, thank you again for your participation in this public hearing, and we'll be guided by not only the speaker but by yourselves in how we're going to move forward in this bill. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you.
Thank you so much. And you're welcome to stay also to provide testimony on the next two bills.
Thank you.
The next bill is Bill 216, and it's introduced by Senator Blas and Senator Toniata, and it's relative to establishing qualifications for the office of Governor and Lieutenant Governor of Guam, as well as residency requirements for all elected officials. And signed up to testify on his personal capacity, because he wears a couple hats. One hat he wears as the member of the Guam Election Commission, and the other hat he wears as the chairman of the Democratic Party of Guam. But I'm pleased to invite Mr. Joaquin Perez, who is representing himself for purposes of this public hearing. Thank you, Mr. Perez, and I also would like to invite the sponsor of this bill, Senator Blas, to provide an overview and a sponsor statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, Bill number 216-33 COR is an act relative to establishing the qualifications for the office of the Governor and Lieutenant Governor of Guam, as well as the residency requirements for all elected officials. You know, Mr. Chair, if you can recall, there was probably several weeks ago, there was basically a news report of the desire of our representative to Washington, who introduced a piece of legislation in the United States Congress that would, in effect, change the Organic Act or amend the Organic Act to basically address or deal with the residency requirements for individuals who want to run for the office of Governor and Lieutenant Governor. And the concerning to that was basically, to me, was the attempt to be able to change the Organic Act, but more so was the attempt to reduce the residency requirements for individuals who wanted to run for this office. You know, in review and of our local statutes, while in the Organic Act it does basically, it does address the requirements, the residency requirements for the Governor and Lieutenant Governor. It's kind of funny because, you know, where the Organic Act talks about these requirements for one office, it doesn't address the requirements for another office. And so what I wanted to do with this piece of legislation was to, in one case, basically affirm basically the residency requirements for what it takes to run for office for the legislature, but then to set the requirements for those individuals who want to run for the office of Governor and Lieutenant Governor to be consistent with what it is already, and you know that you know, hopefully that down the road these qualifications will be addressed in a what I would hope to be a discussion in as far as our political status, which includes the Constitution. Our own Constitution would then, whereby then the true qualifications in for residency would be addressed and set in stone. So, you know, that's what this bill was for. Again, you know, one of the things is the discussion is whether or not this should have been done by, you know, by statute or by referendum or whatever. What we need to do is you know, Mr. Chair, is if that piece of legislation in U.S. Congress were to pass, there could have been that possibility that there would have been no residency requirement for an individual who wanted to run for that office, and that's the fear that we wanted to be able to mitigate, to take care of. So with that, Mr. Chair, I thank you for the opportunity, and I invite and thank you for Mr. Perez to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. I recognize Mr. Perez at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Honorable Chairman, Senator Rory Respicio, and Honorable Senators of the 33rd Guam Legislature. My name is Joaquin Pangilinan Perez, a resident of Santa Rita and a registered voter of Guam for 52 years. I come before you to express my concerns over Bill number 216-33, and indeed to voice my serious concerns in opposition to any attempt to amend provisions of the Organic Act without serious and lengthy discussion and debate towards a consensus of what is good for this island and our people. That discussion and debate must occur here on Guam, not in the dizzy atmosphere on the banks of the Potomac River. First of all, let me address my strong opposition to amending any provision of the Organic Act, which will be convoluted by the U.S. government to mean that the United States has granted even more self-governance to our people. Over many years that I have had the privilege to work with the legislature, the Office of the Governor, and the Commission on Self-Determination, I have witnessed attempts by the federal government to portray to the United Nations the suggestion that Guam should be removed from the list of non-self-governing territories because the U.S. has, over the years, granted Guam self-governance. They suggest that the Organic Act itself provides a measure of self-governance in response to demands by representatives of Guam for U.S. citizenship. The push to remove Guam from the list of colonial possessions continued with the amendment to the Organic Act, creating an elected governor of Guam. The U.S. again argued that because the people of Guam can elect their own governor, that in itself is an act of self-governance. This was repeated when Guam was granted a non-voting delegate seat in the U.S. House of Representatives. It would be very difficult to dispute statements that every individual who has held that seat from Guam became so dizzy with the rarefied air of the Potomac that they forgot their commitment to seek self-determination. I heard about the introduction of H.R. 4091 one evening while watching the evening news. I cannot describe to you the anger I felt that moment. H.R. 4091, introduced by Guam's delegate, will only serve to footnote claims by the U.S. that Guam is self-governing. And that is the most objectionable potential of that measure. For whatever reason the language was concocted and introduced, no amount of rationalization will reduce or mitigate the fact that the measure lends fuel to the claims of the federal government that Guam is not a colony, is not a possession of the United States. The U.S. Supreme Court has affirmed the fact that Guam is an unincorporated possession, is not part of, and probably never will be part of the storied American homeland. Guam is in fact a colony, disposable at the will of Congress, and is not, never has been, and never will be, under the existing federal territorial relationship, self-governing. Speaking directly to Bill 21633, though I applaud the intent of its authors, I am very apprehensive about its long-term implications. I would venture to say that not many of today's incumbent senators will be here 10 or 20 years from now. You will all probably have moved on to bigger and better things. Or you will simply get stressed out, bored at what you do now, and one day proclaim basta. So what is there that will prevent the residency requirements suggested in this legislation from being changed again and again and again, for whatever reason? In this regard, I suggest that residency requirements for elected offices should be a provision in a constitution of Guam, which can be amended or changed only through a referendum and the vote of the people. I think that matters of such importance and consequence should be approved or disapproved only by a vote of Guam's entire electorate. On several matters, the Guam legislature has agreed with this thought and method of creating law. I refer to the referendums on the legalization of medical marijuana, the creation of the Commission on Consolidated Utilities, the elected public auditor, the elected attorney general, and even the reduction of the size of this body from 15 to 21. All which can be repealed or amended by this body at any time, and all which have proven to be disastrous. Along these thoughts, it is interesting to note that in 1977, when the people of Guam actually authorized a constitutional convention, which after much deliberation developed a draft constitution for Guam, the provisions for residency requirements for the office of governor and lieutenant governor read Section 3, qualifications of governor and lieutenant governor. The governor and lieutenant governor shall each be a United States citizen, 30 years of age or older, and a bona fide resident of Guam for at least 15 years, immediately preceding the date of taking office. Please don't take my word for this. Ask Speaker Wampat, she was a member of that convention. Or ask former Governor Carl Gutierrez, who was its president. In my opinion, Senators Frank Blas and Tony Adept are very conscientious policymakers. They introduced this bill to underline the fact that they, as policymakers and elected representatives of the people, think that the existing residency requirements for 5 years specified in the Organic Act actually works and need not be changed at a whim. They understand the value of the old saying, the adage, if it ain't broke, please don't fix it. Something which I think we should impress on whoever we send to Washington. There are a lot of other more important things that need fixing. So if we can agree that the residency requirements are not broken, that they have served us well, then what should be done in light of the irresponsible nature of H.R. 4901? I suggest the adoption of a legislative resolution conveyed to Congress that it is the opinion of this body that the language of the Organic Act relative to residency requirements for elected officials should not be changed. I further suggest to Senators Blas and Ada that as the majority of both houses of Congress is held by the Republican Party, and that ain't going to change soon, that they personally transmit this resolution, not only to the Speaker of the House and President of the Senate, but to the majority leaders of both houses and chairpersons of the appropriate oversight committees. Congresswoman Bradallo is here on Guam, and it's sad that she wasn't here today to defend 4901. Thank you for permitting me this time to express my views on this matter.
Thank you for your testimony as well. Are there any follow-up comments, Senator Blas?
Well, thank you, Mr. Parrish, for your presentation, and I think that your alternative and your suggestion with regards to what should be done is actually something that's very viable and something that we should look into even more. I can see the reason why. Because you're right. I mean, any attempt at any point to be able to change the Organic Act just to be able to try to please us in that fashion is basically, like you says, just basically underscores the fact, or helps to put that mark, for them to say that, look, Guam is self-governing. They did it again. And so I agree with that point. And so I thank you for that. And maybe that's something that we can look at and, I'll talk with the co-author of the legislation and maybe look at going down that road. Again, one of the concerns that I had, and I could see where a resolution could probably stop that process there, is that if H.R. 4901 or 4091 were to pass, it's that little gap in time that I was afraid of, that somebody would have that opportunity of literally stepping off a plane, driving right on down while you guys are having a meeting down at GEC and wanting to pick up a package saying, I'm here and I want to run for governor. Okay. And while a lot of people say that's a far-fetched idea, but that's still a possibility. But it's more so, I guess, like you, and probably wasn't said silent, maybe we should, and well, you did say it. I was a little perturbed at the idea of having to introduce the piece of legislation that would have affected how the people of Guam were going to be decide on its leaders without the conversation actually being had with the community on this. And so I appreciate it, and I appreciate that the chairman and this body does take that opportunity to be able to do this. So thank you very much, Mr. Parrish.
Senator, one of the reasons why I became very angry at this is because I worked for the Congresswoman for 10 years. And during all of that time, I asked her, when can we start moving on not on the Organic Act, on self-determination? And her response to me was that I'm waiting for the people of Guam and the governor for their signal. Okay, if you're going to say that about self-determination in itself, how come this matter is not as great as self-determination? Why couldn't you ask about this one? This one came out of nowhere. And I don't know what it was for, and I don't care. I just don't think that we should mess around with the Organic Act.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Blas. Senator Hagen?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Parrish. Thank you very much for your testimony this afternoon. I agree with you with one of your very strong statements that you made. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Don't try to fix it. Because I think in this case, it really has been what has set precedent over the course of even the last 20 years in my political career. The question I would like to pose to you, because one of the statements that came out from the Congresswoman in sponsoring her legislation, she said there's a lot of Chamorros and a lot of Guamanians that who call Guam home and where Guam is their home, go off island for educational opportunities or for employment opportunities, and they want to come back and serve our community. And now, in this case, based on how the Organic Act is written, they would have to wait that 5 years out. Now, I support the existing provision right now, so don't get the wrong understanding in terms of the posing of my question. But what would be the response then with regards to that statement about these individuals wanting to come back and serve and having to wait that time frame?
You know, my kids are living in San Diego. They've been there for the last 13 years, and one of them may one day come, call me up and say, I want to come home and run for something. And my response to them will be, then come home and wait. Come home and learn what's happening. Come home and be a part of this community, so you not only learn or know what's happening, but feel what's happening. You know, one of the great things about Guam is that you can actually go out there and get the pulse beat of the community just by living here. Because we're such a close community that that's very possible. And when you decide to finally come home, 5 years I don't think is very much time. I'm 70 years old and I don't know where all that time went. I don't know. It's just, let me put it this way. New York and 3 other states have 15-year residency requirements for the governor. A total of 34 states have 5 years or more for residency requirements. And if that many states think that, hey, you got to come here and you got to live here, you got to know what it's like, then I don't think it's unreasonable to keep it at 5. Or, like the Guam Constitution had it, at 15 years. You know what, by that time you would have gotten the wisdom, you would have gotten knowledge about the island. There's an old saying that says that even if you have all of the smarts in the world, if you don't have the wisdom, that doesn't do you any good. All the smarts in the world doesn't do you any good. I think in response to, that office over there, very serious. The governor's office, and if a person is not ready, because he doesn't feel the pulse beat of this community, then I don't think he should be running. I really don't.
Thank you very much. Excellent response. I just want to say that I know of a member or an individual who served in this legislative body just the last term who he went off island and set up his own life with his wife and his kids in the mainland. And then he decided to come back home because of familial needs and business needs. Well, that very same individual waited that 5-year timeline. And it was never an issue on his part in terms of having to wait. So I agree with you in terms of knowing and feeling the pulse of our people, understanding exactly how things are done here on island, and then really knowing how to respond to our people and to serve in any capacity, in an elected capacity. So I appreciate your response. Thank you, Mr. Parrish. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Hagen. There's no other questions. I also want to say thank you for your testimony and your...
One point.
Okay. Senator
Mr. Parrish, and I'd like to be able to pick your brain a little bit because you've actually worked in, with the congressional office. Bill 4091 or 4901, whichever it was introduced right around the first part of December. When can we anticipate, and as far as a timeline, if it was to go fast track? Which
Oh,
probably
right now, I don't think it's going to go very far. And the reason for that is because we're coming very close to the election.
Okay.
There are not going to be that many people occupied in Washington unless it's a really extreme measure. And if it's, my feeling is that someone will probably try to put this on as a rider to something, what they call, a bill that cannot not pass or not be signed. But I don't, because it has to be germane to Guam. I don't think that's going to happen. I really don't think that this thing will pass this year or even early next year. And the reason for that is that Congress is extremely busy, and you've got Washington is a real mess right now. I mean, what's the trust factor of the American people? Less than 20%. So I don't think they're going to be messing around with, if this legislature would tell them, hey, can you just wait a minute? I think they'll listen.
Okay. Because we were looking at as far as the timeline, if we were to go the route that you had.
I don't think it'll pass this year.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Perez, for your presentation.
Oh, one point. We have a meeting tonight of the Guam Election Commission. This will be discussed. And there's also a CEC meeting of the Democratic Party on Tuesday. And I plan to put this on the agenda.
Okay. And so if you get any feedback from those two organizations, the committee record will still be open for those
Your record will
testimonies.
still be
Yes,
open?
of course.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you.
Mr. Perez, can I call you right back for a question from Speaker Wampat? Sorry.
Can I ask you a question? I know the bill speaks to domicile, shall not be domicile in Guam, versus, of course, a resident of Guam. How does the Election Commission, I mean, I know you can have a discussion tonight, but just in your own personal experience, when you consider the two, domicile versus resident?
Well, the key word there is not necessary. One is domiciled. The other key word is bona fide residence. Because you can be a bona fide resident and not be on island, as long as you have the intent to come back. And that also presents a very dangerous situation. Because, let me give you one example. You all remember Lieutenant Governor Eddie Regis. And he was gone for the longest time because he was in the military. He retired off island, actually. But what a lot of people don't know about Eddie Regis is that he voted in every election. He voted absentee in every election. So he never really lost that contact. And he came back whenever he could. And that's the one reason why when Ricky first announced that Eddie Regis was going to be his, we were sitting in the car in the parking lot, and when he mentioned Eddie Regis, none of us knew who he was. I'm serious. I was sitting in the car with David Santos, a couple other guys that eventually became directors, and the first thing we said was, Eddie who? And I knew a lot of Eddie Regis's, and believe me, they were not on the short list. So my response to this thing is that, and when Guam finally gets the ability to write its own constitution, we've got to be very careful with the difference between those two words, domiciled and bona fide resident.
Madam Speaker, anything else? Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, that concludes the discussion on Bill 216-33. The next bill on the agenda is Bill 223-33, and it's relative to providing an appropriation from the Invasive Species Fund. And so I'd like to invite representatives from the Department of Agriculture, the director, Mr. Sablan, Ms. Santos, as well as Mr. Otero to come forward. This is the last item on the agenda, and I want to start by thanking you for your patience. The whole afternoon you got exposed to issues involving the environment, a monument in Hagatnya or somewhere thereabouts, qualifications to run for governor, lieutenant governor, and now we want to focus on the Biosecurities Fund. And I will provide a sponsor statement regarding this bill. But for now, I want to say that the legislature, through the efforts of former Senator Chris Duenas, sponsored Public Law 31-43, which established the Biosecurity Division in the Agriculture Department, and also the Invasive Species Fund. And so what we're attempting to do with this bill is to provide the necessary appropriation from FY fiscal year 2015 and 2016 revenues to the Department of Agriculture to fund vacant positions within its Biosecurity Division. And this bill also authorizes the department to hire a program coordinator to aid in the work of the Biosecurity Division, including help to realize the full potential and the full amounts of revenues from the new fees expected by the department. And the department has quantified that if collections go right, that we could see upwards of $2 million per fiscal year to outfit this entire division. And so I welcome members of the Department of Agriculture, and namely the leader of that department, Director Sablan. I invite you to open up this public hearing and provide your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, the previous three bills, very, very informative, very educational. We did learn a lot about, in fact, a lot related to agriculture, environment stuff. I did pass out handouts of my written testimony. So, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, Madam Speaker, Senators. I am Matthew Longoro Sablan, currently the Director of the Guam Department of Agriculture. I come before your committee to testify in favor of Bill number 223-33 COR, an act relative to appropriating revenues from the invasive species fees to fund the operations of the Biosecurity Division of the Department of Agriculture. We as a department understand that it is the intention of the bill sponsor in introducing the bill to provide staffing for the new created division established by Public Law 31-43. This division is currently manned by a Commodity Inspector 3 and a Commodity Inspector 2. With FY16 budget submission, we included 10 proposed positions for the startup of the Biosecurity Division. However, funding for the department is only authorized for warm bodies. The recruitment of a program coordinator is to oversee the inspection, quarantine, eradication of invasive species in freight containers to Guam. It is direly needed in addition to handling the administrative requirements in this division. Collection of fees that went into effect July 2015 have not been monitored due to shortage of manpower. This PC4 will able to concentrate on the accounts and follow up on shipping agencies that have not paid in or late in payments. To date, there is only a deposit of $37,678. With the upcoming 12th Festival of Pacific Arts, with Guam hosting 27 countries in May of this year, it is incumbent that the division be staffed to protect our natural resources from biological invasion and threats from visiting countries in protecting our environment and endangered species. Based on the above, we offer our support on the bill, and we urge the committee to consider passing this bill for consideration by the entire body of the 33rd Guam Legislature. Thank you for providing me with the opportunity to offer testimony on Bill 223-33. Situs Masi.
Yeah, thank you again, Director. Mr. Arturo, do you have anything to add? Or
Yes.
these two things to say. Half a day, everybody. Good afternoon. Honorable Senator Rory Respicio. Thank you, Chairman of Human Resources, for the introduction of Bill 223-33. I fully support this bill to enact an appropriation of the revenues from the Invasive Species Fee Fund to operate the Biosecurity Division in the Department of Agriculture. With the Public Law 31-43 that established the Guam Invasive Species Fee Fund to provide proper staffing for the Biosecurity Division for the Department of Agriculture. The Department of Agriculture, as determined by the Program Coordinator 4, is to be needed to help with the collection of the invasive species funds from the shipping agents and collection of the bill of ladings and shipping industry to make sure they're paying the amount of 75 cents per every 1,000 pounds of imported cargo. Also, with the recruitment of the staff of biosecurity divisions, such as an entomologist, a plant pathologist, a botanist, an invasive species coordinator, and a biosecurity officers. Over the past 8 years, the positions in the biosecurity division has been vacant, with only one permanent employee, which is me as the acting chief of the biosecurity division with agriculture. Please help support Bill 223 to help Guam Agriculture Biosecurity Division protect the economy, natural environment, and health and lifestyle for the people and the invasive species. Currently, we have 5 LTAs that we're going to be terminated within March 2nd. And with the FESPAC coming up, we were in dire need of staff. So I humbly support with this bill to open up this fees to start hiring critical need positions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Senators, I'm just here to support the bill also because I really need help. I am a one-man team, and right now there's nobody that's monitoring what collection is supposed to be in, and this is the reason why we really need this position to be filled.
Yeah, thank you also for your testimony, and the reason why the bill is being presented in Section 2 and in Section 3. In Section 2, it appropriates the money from those funds collected from fiscal year 2015 and fiscal year 2016. Now, you may have a staffing pattern that would reflect an operating annual budget of about $2 million, but we're not there yet.
Right.
So that's why Section 3 authorizes the specific employment of a program coordinator. And I just wanted to make that clear. So as the program coordinator is effective in billing and collecting, and as the fund grows, the Director of Agriculture will have the authority, if this bill passes and is signed into law, to provide a staffing pattern that will immediately reflect whatever is being collected. So we don't have to wait for the fund to generate $2 million to come back to the legislature to appropriate the money. We thought, colleagues, that this is the most prudent way of getting them the resources as quickly as possible without having to wait for the monies to be generated. And so it's a simultaneous approach to resolving a very critical need facing the Department of Agriculture. And that's your understanding of the bill as well, right?
That's correct, Mr. Chair.
Okay. And before I invite my colleagues to ask questions or make comments regarding this bill, I want to point out there's a lot of things that this government does, and to the governor's credit and our ability to work with the administration, there's a lot of the things that we've done in working closely with the Director of Agriculture and his staff. We've done this behind the scenes with no public fanfare or any attention in the media to resolve very critical areas. And one area I'm talking about is the fact that the territorial entomologist retired shortly sometime before Christmas, and if not for the Director and Mr. Artero's efforts to convince Dr. Campbell to continue on, it would have meant that the Christmas trees coming in for the Christmas holiday would not have been cleared at the customs at the port. It's just an example of how people may not recognize the hard work that all of you do on a daily basis, but once one Christmas tree is not able to be cleared, or once produce is not able to be cleared, they'll certainly feel the impact almost immediately. So my congratulations and my appreciation to Dr. Campbell also for agreeing to come back on a contract just until you're able to recruit some other individual to fill that entomologist position. So go ahead and take the opportunity to tell the committee how difficult that was and what kind of a crisis that was presented to the island and how all of you were able to avert that. Patrick, we talked about that in great length, and also working with USDA, you said, to provide those kinds of guidances and those kinds of temporary leniency until the matter can be resolved. So.
Yes, Senator. We were working with Animal Plant-Off Inspection Services with USDA to secure that University of Guam will assist us with pest ID, with the entomology department, and whatever produce that comes in, customs and quarantine, we'll inspect and we'll set it up through UOG, and also with the federal government via sending FedEx for identification to Hawaii for within the Christmas trees to make sure everything's expedited properly.
And at the time, I also wrote a letter to Governor Calvo asking him to expedite the contract for Dr. Campbell. So all of those things kind of work very well together.
Well, currently, right now, we need to do an RFP, and then once we get that going, and then we can do a sole source should anybody not apply for it. And we identified funding, which is a general fund funding from the plant inspection. So we anticipate, hopefully by March, that would happen.
But currently, he's in place, and there's.
Well, we have to make sure that we go through the RFP procurement process, and then once that's done by advertising it, then we can proceed with the contract. But we do have a contract from Dr. Campbell. It's just a matter of going through the process of the RFP.
Senator Morrison. Yeah, question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, Director and panel. If the staffing was at full capacity, or what would it be the funding levels given, or what is the funding levels at this time right now?
The funding level?
Yes.
Oh, right now, for the biosecurity, right now we only have 37,000 in there that's collected. So with that amount, we can get a program coordinator for, because it's already, by the time we get this position in place, it'll be by March. So the funding we have here would be sufficient to cover throughout September until we can get the full picture of how much is actually in there, because we know that there's some shipping agencies that have not paid in.
Okay.
That's correct. We do have some challenges on the timeliness of the shipping agents as far as the payment. And again, this PC4 will be very instrumental in making sure the updates of payments are on time.
The economic statement will call for an initial generated levels of $2 million. Of this $2 million, are they reoccurring, or is there reoccurring a fee schedule here, or is it these are just one-time inspection fees? Because the economic statement calls for $2 million, as the chairman was stating to. But is any of these fees reoccurring? Because I guess I'm assuming that once we hit these levels, there possibly be filling those positions. However, the concern I have is, are these fees reoccurring to sustain these positions, these staffing levels?
That's correct. It's a fee per container, so it's $2 million a year, right?
That's correct, Senator. With the tonnage, 75 cents per 1,000 tons coming in import cargo into the island, and with the economic analysis with Dr. Russell Campbell, calculated $2.5 million a year, plus with inflation every year, that money will go up. Just to staff the biosecurity division was to start with $180,000 with the plant pathologist. It was the specialized positions, and come every year. Then we have within the law 31-43 has with the GIS and the GISAC Council, and with the GIS having set aside meetings with the committee to provide manpower, supplies, capital improvement, set aside money for an invasive outbreak such as we have with the coconut rhinoceros beetle, the little fire ant, and also working with Customs and Quarantine to get a bonded warehouse for inspection down at the port. So those fees will be calculated within the GIS, which is the Guam Invasive Species Committee, and also with GISAC, with the Guam Invasive Advisory Council, will be up to them with the fine where those funds will go for those remaining balance. But like I mentioned, every fiscal year, those fees will be going up.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Now, are you okay with the bill as introduced? Do you see any amendments that are necessary since our meeting yesterday?
As of now, nothing, Senator.
Okay.
But anyways, I want to acknowledge Mr. Roland Kirigua. He's really instrumental partner with, as far as with UOG, and in fact he's an interim secretary for the Guam Invasive Species Council, and of course we revived that last November. So that's one of the mandates as far as the Public Law 3143. So yes, UOG is in good partnership with the department.
Okay, and just to be clear, although Section 2 of the bill would provide an appropriation to the Biosecurity Division to create this staffing pattern, that although this authority is there, it will not be executed unless the cash is there.
That's right.
So in addition to what Senator Morrison brought up, which was a great point, that although you're projecting $2 million a year, you're not going to immediately hire people and have a $2 million liability without having the funds deposited in this invasive species fund in order to pay these individuals.
That's correct.
Okay. And if you're willing or wanting to propose language to make that clear, we could entertain that. But as of now, that's the understanding. It's been the understanding all along.
Yes, this is how I interpret it also.
Yep. Okay. There's nothing else. Speaker Wampan?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I was looking at, of course, the task force plan that was submitted for November 10, 2009. And my question is on your preliminary budget for the first year under personnel. I would like to ask specifically for all these, the biosecurity officer, agriculture specialist, canine teams, entomologists, plant pathologists, botanists, and then the plant inspection facility staff. Are any one of these individuals or positions currently being funded under agriculture?
None.
None. So the entomologists that you have right now?
Well, right now we have a recruitment for that. It's going to take a while because it took us like 3-4 years to get Dr. Campbell. So we know for a fact that it's going to take time to hire somebody to fill that position. So that's why we're going to put it on contract for the time being.
Okay, and so all of these positions then you have not recruited until such time then it's totally dependent on what then you're able to collect before you go out to recruit.
Correct.
So then the entomologists that you're going to have in contract now, where would that fall under, since you've indicated that 37,000 collected so far is only sufficient to hire a PC4 up to September of this fiscal year?
The contract is going to happen in the general fund, and we are going to, I got the clearance from BBMR that once we go through the RFP, then we do once we get the money transferred from personnel, we're going to put it into contract for Dr. Campbell. And
so it's going to come from your budget then for the...
I'm sorry?
Right now, if you do put out an RFP and you hire the individual in a contract, it will come out of agriculture's budget.
Correct.
And would you be able to sustain what it is that, your budget was for, inclusive now of, a contract? And what's the amount are we looking at?
Well, the amount that for now, Dr. Campbell is asking at $6,000 a month.
Okay, and Mr. Director, of course, you're going to have to make that determination in terms of continuing to, operate with your current budget and now, of course, less 6,000 a month.
No, that money's already budgeted, Speaker.
You're right, it is. But I'm
Yeah.
saying that it's not now, it wasn't originally designed for an entomologist, right? It was
right.
still part of your operations.
Right, and I did sit down with, of course, Ms. Tony Santos, ASO, and we did the numbers, and of course, we were advised, came to that conclusion. So
So-
it is under general fund.
What is, you've indicated, I'm sorry, I don't have your name, but you've indicated that you have 5 LTAs that you're going to lose in March. What was the total amount for these individuals, let's say that, monies are available to be able to keep these 5 LTAs, on board to continue to keep them?
Right. These 5 LTAs were procured by a grant from U.S. Farm Bill that Dr. Russell Campbell provided, and I went ahead and continued after he retired. I applied for the Farm Bill as a extension to get these 5 LTAs still employed, but we won't get the suggestions or the grant warranted till mid-March. Currently, it runs from $180,000. With this grant, it's including Coconut Rhinoceros Beetle Management Program, Fruit Fly Surveillance Program, and we're currently still pursuing those grants and trying to keep them on board. In the meantime, we just need to get this invasive species fee adjusted so we can hire the biosecurity staff. And including, we have a permit fund which generates with our local import permits. Hopefully we can get money set aside to continue to operate the biosecurity division and keep its doors open and keep the public in Guam safe from any invasive species.
How long have these LTAs been on board?
The LTAs are every fiscal year their contract is renewed, so every year.
The same individuals?
Correct.
And for how long has this been?
UOG spearheaded it within 3-4 years, and then agriculture took over just last year. Or correction, UOG had it for like 5 years, and agriculture took over within last year with the grants.
So, and it's the same individuals, and these individuals have already been trained and all that, but because they're limited term and we're running out of federal dollars, of course, that's always the stipulation on OGG ones, that when federal dollars, of course, are no longer available, then, of course, they will be terminated. But it's unfortunate, of course, that these individuals have been trained, been doing the work, and then now this. Do you see, of course, I don't want this to be contingent upon, the collections only to say then, because we don't know how soon the monies are going to come in. Do you see a possible overlap where, money's being collected once this, is in place, to be able to collect those monies, to be able to bridge the gap, as until such time then that either the federal monies are available, then to keep these individuals on, is what I'm saying, by bridging the gap between fees collected and the grant monies coming in?
Yes, definitely, Senator. We're working with our AO in procuring import permit funds, capital improvement funds, also working with the federal government, continuously working with conference calls and getting these grants approved ahead of time to pick up these 5 remaining individuals, other than extending it and getting other grants so they can continue with their program with the CRB management program and the CAPS, which is a fruit fly surveillance program. Doing our best. Is just a procurement process within the government, and we just need to find all means possible, and with an invasive species fee will help assure some of these positions to keep our staff available and to recruit staffing for specialists such as a botanist, plant pathologist, invasive species coordinator, and it will truly then be a division for Department of Agriculture.
Okay. And one last question. I know you spoke really fast, but I didn't catch everything you said. That it was, in terms of fees, it's 75 cents for every 1,000 pounds of a container?
Correct, Senator. Those fees were exclusive with the liquids and fill, and not to include air cargo. So this is only for the commercial port. These fees were mimicked to Hawaii, and it's already been 5 years. Hawaii's been really good with this program, and they currently employ over 300 personnel within their biosecurity division. So hopefully we can generate enough funding to boost up the biosecurity division, and with the GIST and the GIST Act to extend grants within this fee to help protect the island of Guam from invasive species. And we won't have to solely rely on federal grants. We can just rely on this invasive species fee.
And I know you've gone through the AAA process, and was this the exact fees then that came as a result of the AAA? There's no increase, it's the same?
Yes, ma'am, the same.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. The Director, did you have additional comments?
No. I just want to thank you again, Senators, Mr. Chair, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity for us to testify in support of this bill. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And so, there being no further comments on this bill has also been publicly heard, and having exhausted the agenda for this afternoon, we're adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator.